This is a jawbone.
It belonged to a woman named Sarah. She was 19 years old. She worked in a matchstick factory in London, and in the dark, her jaw glowed green. This condition had a name. They called it Phossy Jaw. It was caused by white phosphorus, the chemical used to make matches. The phosphorus didn't just touch the skin, it soaked into the bone. It rotted the jaw from the inside out. The pain was unbearable. The smell was worse, and the only treatment was amputation. They sawed off pieces of your face while you were awake. Sarah died in 1888. She was one of thousands. And her employer knew. They all knew. But matches were profitable, and women were cheap. This is the story of how the Industrial Revolution didn't just exploit women, it consumed them. First their bodies, then their freedom, then their time. And it's still eating.
You've been taught that the labor movement was built by men. Big, angry men with hammers and hard hats. Coal miners, steel workers, dock workers.
That's a lie. The first mass industrial strike in British history wasn't led by men. It was led by teenage girls with rotting faces. The year was 1888. The place was the Bryant and May Match Factory in East London. 1,400 women and girls worked there, some as young as 13. They worked 14-hour days in rooms filled with toxic fumes. They earned less than 5 shillings a week, barely enough to eat. And if they complained, they were fined. If they were late, they were fined. If they talked, they were fined. The phosphorus ate their bones, but the system ate their dignity. Then one day, a journalist named Annie Besant published an article. She called it White Slavery in London. She described the conditions, the injuries, the deaths. The factory tried to force the workers to sign a statement saying they were treated well. The workers refused. And then they walked out. 1,400 women, most of them teenagers. They had no union, no strike fund, no legal protection, but they had rage. And they won. Within 2 weeks, the factory agreed to nearly all their demands. Better pay, better conditions, an end to the fines. It was the first victory of the modern labor movement, and it was won by women the world had written off as disposable. If they hadn't fought, if they hadn't bled, the system wouldn't have changed. Everything you have today, the 40-hour work week, the minimum wage, workplace safety laws, it all started with girls whose jaws glowed in the dark. The villains of this story weren't monsters. They were businessmen, respectable, church-going, wealthy. They didn't see themselves as evil. They saw themselves as pragmatists. Women were the perfect workforce. They were paid half of what men earned. They were considered naturally suited to repetitive tasks. Sewing, sorting, packing, cleaning, and, most importantly, they were seen as temporary. A woman would work until she got married. Then she'd leave. No pensions, no promotions, no demands. She was a renewable resource. By 1900, millions of women were working in factories across the United States. Garment factories, textile mills, canneries, laundries. They were called working girls, not women, girls. Even if they were 40, the conditions were brutal. The pay was starvation wages, and the danger was constant. But the factory owners had a secret weapon, the locked door. You see, the owners didn't trust women. They were afraid the workers would steal fabric, or take unauthorized breaks, or, God forbid, organize. So they locked the exits. If you needed to leave, you had to ask permission. If there was a fire, you had to wait for someone to unlock the door. It wasn't a safety measure. It was a cage. And on March 25, 1911, that cage became a tomb. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory was located on the 8th, 9th, and 10th floors of a building in Greenwich Village, New York. It employed around 500 workers. Most of them were young immigrant women, Italians, Jews, teenagers who spoke little English. They sewed blouses, shirtwaists, 10 hours a day, 6 days a week. The room was packed. The tables were crammed together. The floors were covered in fabric scraps soaked in oil. There were 2 staircases. One was locked from the outside. The other led to a single, narrow fire escape. There were no sprinklers, no alarms, no drills. On March 25th, a fire started on the 8th floor. No one knows exactly how. Maybe a cigarette, maybe a spark from a machine. It didn't matter. Within minutes, the entire floor was engulfed. The women ran for the exits. The first door was locked. The second led to the fire escape. It was rusted, weak. 50 women climbed onto it at once. And then it collapsed. They fell 8 stories. Their bodies smashed into the pavement below. The women still trapped inside had 2 choices: burn or jump. They jumped, one after another. Some held hands. Some held their pay envelopes. Some were already on fire. The firefighters arrived within minutes, but their ladders only reached the 6th floor. All they could do was watch. 146 people died that day, most of them women, most of them under the age of 25. The owners, Max Blank and Isaac Harris, were charged with manslaughter. They were acquitted. The jury decided that the locked door was a reasonable business practice. The families of the dead received $75 each in compensation. The factory owners collected a large insurance payout, and 2 years later, they were caught locking doors again in a different factory. This wasn't a tragedy. It was a business model. The Triangle Fire changed everything. The outrage was so massive, so visceral, that even the politicians couldn't ignore it. New York passed 36 new labor laws in the next 3 years. Fire safety codes, building inspections, factory regulations. Women had finally forced the system to see them as human, but the system had a longer memory than they realized. Fast forward 30 years. It's 1941. The United States enters World War II. And suddenly, there's a problem. The factories need workers, millions of them, but the men are gone. They're overseas, fighting. So the government does something radical. They ask women to work, not just in garment factories, in shipyards, munitions plants, aircraft assembly lines. The propaganda machine roars to life. Rosie the Riveter appears on posters everywhere. We can do it. Women flood into the factories. They learn to weld, to rivet, to operate heavy machinery. They're good at it, better than anyone expected. They build the bombers that win the war. They keep the economy alive. They prove, beyond any doubt, that they are just as capable as men. And then the war ends, and the men come home, and the women are told to leave. Not politely, they're fired, en masse, by the millions. The propaganda flips overnight. Suddenly, Rosie the Riveter disappears. She's replaced by the happy housewife. Magazines, TV shows, advertisements, all of them say the same thing. A woman's place is in the home. Real fulfillment comes from family. Working women are selfish. It wasn't tradition. It was gaslighting. The system had used women when it needed them. And the second it didn't, it shoved them back into the kitchen. And it called that liberation. You'd think the story ends there. Women fought back. They marched, they sued, they demanded equality. And by the 1970s, they won. Title IX, the Equal Pay Act, Roe v. Wade. Women flooded back into the workforce. They got degrees. They got promotions. They got corner offices. The glass ceiling cracked. Victory. Right? Wrong. Because the system didn't give women equality, it gave them a second shift. Here's what actually happened. Women entered the workforce. But they never left the home. They still did the cooking, the cleaning, the childcare. They just added 40 hours of paid labor on top of it. Sociologists have a term for this. They call it the double burden. Studies show that women, on average, do 2.5 times more unpaid domestic labor than men, even when both partners work full-time, even when they earn the same salary. The dishes, the laundry, the school pickups, the doctor's appointments. It's called invisible labor, and it's exhausting. The modern working woman isn't liberated. She's just working two jobs. One pays, one doesn't, and the system profits from both. Because when women work, they produce, and when they come home, they reproduce the next generation of workers. They're doing double the labor for half the recognition, and we call it progress. But it gets worse. Because now, the economy doesn't just expect women to work two jobs. It sells them the solution. Meal kits, cleaning services, daycare, self-care Sundays. You're not oppressed. You're just stressed.
Buy this candle. Take this yoga class. Lean in. The system didn't free women. It monetized their exhaustion. The factory doors aren't locked anymore, but the machine is still running. It doesn't need to lock the doors.
Because we've internalized the cage. We call it ambition, hustle, balance. But it's the same trap. The women who struck in 1888 had Phossy Jaw.
The women who burned in 1911 had locked doors. The women who built bombers in 1943 were told to go home. And the women working today? They have burnout. Different century. Same fuel. The machine doesn't care what we call it. As long as we keep feeding it, subscribe to see what it eats next.